The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant. And on today's episode, as we reach a milestone here on the Droids Canada Network on this show, and I want to thank each and every one of you that listens to this show. If it wasn't for your support, we certainly wouldn't be continuing doing this show. But we did have something planned for today. It was going to be a lighthearted topic, but in all seriousness, with the recent events in Canada, we can't leave this out. And this is information that needs to be known. We've called out on this show that there is going to be a coming election in Canada. Has not been called yet, but it's looking like it will. But on today's episode is a continuation of last week's episode in which the Liberal government, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, has accepted money from China, the Communist Party of China. There's a particular MP that has taken money from the Chinese government, and he ended up winning his seat. So we wanted to cover this story because it's very interesting. If you go back to our original episodes, 100 shows ago, you can look back and we talked about the rules for radicals. And some of these techniques and these rules, we can look at and apply them to how particular parties in the media, Democrats or Republicans, use these particular tactics, but none more than Justin Trudeau. And this is an example of his speech and where he's going with his speech that can be quite a problem if it's not corrected in Canada. We know Bill C-11 is coming out. That's the online censorship laws in which you cannot say certain things. We've talked about how unions, which are funded by the government, control print media, legacy media. They control the TVs in forms of the unions and their employees. So the last free realm, and I'll use air quotes on that one, would be the internet, and that's why the Liberal government wants to implement that Bill C-11. But as we talked about on last week's show, we mentioned the disinformation that they were using, the Liberals were using. Oh, we don't know about what's happening. There's so much disinformation. And if you're paying attention to mainstream media, legacy media, you'll hear that word used so often, and only in Canada do you hear it the most, is the term misinformation. So I want to start with a clip here from our dear, glorious leader, the one that's on record of saying that he admires Canada's basic dictatorship. So let's play a clip here from our glorious leader.
Today, I can announce that we're investing $5.5 million to build capacity of civil society organizations to combat disinformation. Because we know disinformation, often generated abroad, can be a real threat to our elections, and it's a threat that the federal government cannot combat alone. Foreign interference is a complex landscape that should not be boiled down to sound bites and binary choices. And it should certainly not be about partisan politics.
So there he is, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, talking about foreign interference and how it's bad. And that sound clips shouldn't be used. Well, sound clips and sound bites have been used for ever since media started. It's headline grabbing, attention grabbing. Before there was audio, you had these really great headlines. We've covered on this show great headlines from England, which happens to be the headline capital, in my opinion, of the entire world. They can write a headline to really get you to want to buy a paper to read the article. In online and using YouTube or Facebook, Instagram, you want a good soundbite so people will watch, will interact, because it's all about engagement. So today's article from March 8th, as Pierre Poilievre presses on election interference, Trudeau calls suggestion he isn't loyal to Canada despicable. The Prime Minister faces fresh allegations he was briefed on Beijing's plans to fund candidates. Questions about whether the Prime Minister's office was briefed on on alleged Chinese interference in the 2019 election dominated question period again on Wednesday, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau calling questions that he isn't loyal to Canada, quote, despicable. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre tried multiple times Wednesday to get the Prime Minister to respond to allegations that he and his national security advisor were warned that Chinese government officials were funneling money to Canadian political candidates, despite their claims to the contrary. According to reporting by Global News, the Privy Council office prepared a report for the Trudeau government warning that Chinese officials in Toronto dispersed money to a, quote, covert network tasked to interfere in Canada's 2019 election, end quote. A large clandestine transfer of funds earmarked for the federal election from the PRC consulate, People's Republic of China, in Toronto was transferred to an elected provincial government official via a staff member of a 2019 federal candidate, the report says, according to Global. Global reported similar allegations back in November that the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, or CSIS, briefed Trudeau in January 2022 on Chinese efforts to interfere in that election. The interference reportedly included the Chinese government sending money to at least 11 candidates. We have no information on any federal candidates receiving money from China. That is still the case, Trudeau said in the House of Commons on Wednesday. Poilievre asked all the questions directed at the Prime Minister Wednesday. He pressed Trudeau to state which staffers received briefings and how much his party got in illegal donations funneled from Beijing. He is not interested in protecting the safety of the people serving this country. He's interested in protecting the Liberal Party of Canada, said Poilievre. The day before, the Conservative leader suggested to reporters that security officials have been leaking allegations about election interference to the media because they, quote, must be very worried about how the Prime Minister is working against the interest of his own country and his own people, end quote. And so they are concerned about how the Prime Minister is acting against Canada's interest and in favor of a foreign dictatorship's interest, that they are actually releasing this information publicly, he said Tuesday. Trudeau said it was despicable for an MP to question the loyalty of another member of Parliament. To suggest that anyone in this House isn't devoted to serving Canadians and keeping those who serve Canada in dangerous positions safe is quite disgusting, he said Wednesday during a rowdy exchange with the opposition. The Conservative leader responded that no drama lesson, and that's in reference to him being a former drama teacher, would distract him from his questions and again pushed for more information about the alleged funding. I've asked multiple times. I find it incredible that he can't stand up and answer with a zero, Poilievre said. Trudeau then suggested Poilievre was trying to backtrack from his heinous and disgusting accusations of disloyalty to Canada. The testy question period followed weeks of questions about Canada's interference in the past two elections and what the federal government knew about it. A panel of civil servants set up to monitor for foreign meddling during the last two elections said that while they did observe attempts at interference, it did not reach a level that would have threatened the integrity of the results. Speaking to reporters earlier in the day, Trudeau deflected specific queries while acknowledging Canadians have unanswered questions about China's role in the past two elections. He suggested a recently announced special rapporteur and two intelligence agencies are better placed to look into what kind of information was shared with whom. To be quite honest, I know that no matter what I say, Canadians continue to have questions about what we did and what we didn't, he told reporters on Parliament Hill on Wednesday. It is of concern to people that China continues to try to interfere and other countries are interfering in our democratic processes. Trudeau's National Security and Intelligence Advisor, Jody Thomas, told committee in December she saw no evidence that any candidates in the 2019 federal election were influenced by money from the Chinese government. The news stories that you have read about interference are just that, news stories, Thomas said. I'll just say it. We've not seen money going to 11 candidates, period. On Wednesday, Trudeau said recently that announced a special rapporteur. This is a new position that he created, just like the security and intelligence advisor is a made-up position that Trudeau created. They will dig deeply into everything anyone knew at any point. That's what CSIS could do. You could just have the report from CSIS and make it public so everyone can see it. But that's the easy way to do things. Or it's a way to cover up doing things. He has also tasked two intelligence watchdogs, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians and the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency, to look into the allegations and how the intelligence agencies responded. He said they have access to all top secret documents, all briefings that might have been made or could have been made or were not made from CSIS. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh said Trudeau's responses to questions on this topic have been lacking. The Prime Minister is signaling that he not taking this seriously and is somewhat being dismissive, and also in his action is seeming like there is more and more to hide. All of this is not helping Canadians have confidence in their electoral system. And that's why we need to have a public inquiry, he said before question period. Let's figure out what we can do to prevent this and reinforce our election system. Trudeau said that he had a special rapporteur could recommend a public inquiry. A spokesperson for the People's Republic of China denies the claim that it interfered in Canada's election. China always opposes interference in other countries' internal affairs. We have no interest in and will not interfere in Canada's internal affairs, Mao Ning, spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, told a media briefing on Wednesday. It's absurd that some in Canada are making an issue about China based on disinformation and lies. So make the reports public, make everything public, release the information, and get to the bottom of it. What I find strange is that Trudeau has announced $5.5 million to combat disinformation, to stop disinformation. Well, who's deciding what disinformation is? Is this allegation disinformation? We should be taking this seriously as a government and investigating. If it came from CSIS, there's good reason to believe the information. That's what you pay them to do. Find information, track down information. These are professionals, and they have the clearance and they have the tools to do their jobs. Don't create a new department to do the investigation. Have the institutions that are a part of the government already to do the investigation, and stop giving money away to fight misinformation. Because you can't define what misinformation is. What is misinformation? There has been not a single definition of misinformation. We've talked about this on the show. There is no definition of what misinformation is. And that's dangerous. How do you label something as misinformation? And when we get to the show, which we will get to the show about the war in Ukraine, and when we get to the war in Ukraine, what is misinformation and what is truth? It's a very dangerous time in Canada as censorship laws come into place, as rules about speech come into place, of misgendering, as rules come in on what you can and cannot say, rules of who and who cannot report, or what is a journalist. Dangerous times. And we'll close off the show with a tweet from Justin Trudeau. And today is a very important day. It's the International Women's Day. And he tweeted out the following 2 tweets. When women and girls are empowered, entire families, communities, and societies succeed. So today, as we mark hashtag IWD 2023 and celebrate the incredible women and girls in our lives, let's keep working to build a more equal and equitable future. The second tweet to follow that. And with a disturbing rise in anti-transgender hate here in Canada and around the world recently, I want to be very clear about one more thing. Trans women are women. We will always stand up to this hate whenever and wherever it occurs. So from the mouth of the Prime Minister, if you do not agree with the statement that trans women are women, you're filled with hate and you should have no voice. You shouldn't be on the radio, you shouldn't be on the internet, and you should not exist. Because again, we've played the clip. He does believe that there are Canadians that hold unacceptable views. So the question is, what do you do with those unacceptable views? Do you take them to re-education camps? I'd like to thank you for tuning in and supporting us through 100 episodes. We definitely appreciate each and every one of you that has reached out over the years. And I'd personally like to thank you and wish you a great and successful year. And for wherever you are in the world, have yourself a great week. Thank you for listening to The Fact Is on the Droids Canada Network. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, this is Hollis Grant, host of The Fact Is. You can find us Wednesdays on droidscanada.com, where we discuss current affairs from around the world.